Interpreting the world horoscope. In the correlating of influences and the judging of any horoscope, individual, national, or of the world, certain primary factors must be taken into account. The first essential is to fully understand the house division of the chart, what those houses mean, and what they govern. All horoscope maps are divided into 12 equal parts and numbered as shown below. Basic structure. Imagine a perfect circle divided into 12 equal segments, like a clock face. These segments are called houses and are numbered from 1 to 12 in a counterclockwise direction. The circle is oriented with cardinal directions: north at the bottom, south at the top, east on the left, and west on the right. Directional layout. The first house begins at the eastern horizon, 9 o'clock position. The 10th house sits at the southern point, 12 o'clock position. The 7th house aligns with the western horizon, 3 o'clock position. The 4th house rests at the northern point, 6 o'clock position. House sequence, starting from the eastern horizon. Houses 1, 3 occupy the northeast quadrant. Houses 4, 6 occupy the northwest quadrant. Houses 7, 9 occupy the southwest quadrant. Houses 10, 12 occupy the southeast quadrant. Think of this arrangement as a cosmic wheel, eternally turning through space, with each house representing a different aspect of worldly affairs. The houses maintain their positions relative to each other, creating a framework through which we interpret astrological influences on global events and human affairs. Each of these 12 divisions acts as a lens through which specific areas of life are interpreted, from personal matters in the first house to hidden influences in the 12th house. Each house of the horoscope has rulership over certain definite conditions, aspects, and activities of human affairs. House meanings. The first house, which in an individual horoscope governs the temperament and form of the individual, will in the world horoscope govern the consensus of world opinion and becomes the window through which the world as a whole is seen during the particular period or year under review. The second house will influence the monetary systems and finance of the world generally, showing the fluctuation of currencies and prices. The third house governs world transport, communications, the United Nations Organization, and all councils that are convened to deal with world affairs, posts and telegraphs, road regulations, railways. The fourth house has rule over land and land boundaries, property, agriculture, reforestation, international sea boundaries, fishing rights, national patriotism, racial distinctions. The fifth house, the world stock exchanges, national lotteries and sweepstakes and laws appertaining to betting, international child welfare organizations, the birth and development of young nations, education. The sixth house, international labour and trade union affairs, quarantine regulations, world health and hygiene as applied to individuals and food, the transport of animals, medicine and drugs, world police. The seventh house governs all treaties and commitments between nations, including such organisations as UNO. It also has control over national, international and interracial affairs as they affect political, trade union and commercial interests. Bilateral and multilateral agreements regarding defence, trade and finance, and so far as UNO is concerned, world health and hygiene. All activities connected with NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organisation, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade Organisation, and the Southeast Asia Treaty Organisation will be influenced. The importance of this house influence is that it includes open enemies, and thus has an effect on all organisations of a worldwide nature, whether the participants are friendly or not. Hostilities come under this house. The eighth house governs death. This, however, does not necessarily imply physical death only. In world affairs, it has control over the passing of regimes, institutions, nations, modes of living, customs, the altering of lines of thought, and action in literature, music, and the arts. Regulations regarding the burial of the dead come under this house, as does also the death of kings, queens, and leaders of ruling houses. Although this house has control over physical death, it also governs terrestrial upheavals such as earthquakes, tidal waves, floods, whirlwinds, etc., which result in devastation and mass deaths. Viewed from a national point of view, such items as death and estate duties, compensation for destruction or loss due to war, and what is generally known as an act of God. The ninth house has control over all matters to do with ocean travel and overseas air travel, as distinct from short-distance journeys. These involve the consequential incidentals such as passports, visas, customs regulations, inoculation and vaccination, immigration control, etc. In this age of potential space travel, all rocketry developments, the creation and launching of satellites such as Telstar and moon shots, as well as the mental and physical training of astronauts, come under the control of this house. National and international law such as territorial frontiers and maritime limits, the general judiciary are included. This house also governs religious beliefs, nationally established religions, and all offshoots in the nature of strange or unusual faiths and sects. The 10th house has rule over the government or party that is in power in any country, and the prime minister or person who exercises main control. It influences the national pride or integrity, and the esteem, or otherwise, in which certain countries are held by their neighbours, or even more distant countries. Certain of the industries or commercial activities of nations individually and of the world generally are dominated by this house, and in particular coal, iron and steel, machine tools and what may be termed heavy industry. The 11th house has more specific rule over the social and public side of affairs, and those generally who are termed the upper classes of any particular nation. Cultural and artistic matters will be affected both nationally and internationally, and this house has a very strong influence over matters to do with music, especially composing and conducting. Hence it will govern the world's largest and most famous orchestras, the outstanding centres of theatre and ballet, and the most prominent personages connected therewith. From a very broad standpoint, it can also be said to rule the world's hopes and wishes, as expressed by the foremost statesmen, evangelists, artists, writers, etc. It will also have some influence over such interests as astronomy and astrology. The 12th house is definitely associated with prisons, reformatories, hospitals, and all places where circumstances, law or hygiene compel some form of restriction. It will signify national and world trends as regards crime, drugs and vice, and alternatively, the periods when steps are taken to bring about an overcoming of the evils that exist. It governs secret, mystical and psychic matters, magic and witchcraft. Again, from a broad standpoint, the sorrows and miseries which beset races and countries from time to time, often as a result of the wrongdoing of the rulers or inhabitants. Planetary influences. Each planet exerts a unique influence that can be either helpful or harmful, depending on the situation. These influences work in two ways, as a primary or secondary force. In some cases, planets act as primary rulers, taking on a dominant role, while in others, they serve as secondary rulers, with a lesser but still significant impact. In the world horoscope, every house, whether it represents the entire world, a specific nation, or a particular region, has both a primary and secondary planetary ruler. The primary ruler is the stronger of the two and has greater power based on its nature and the sign or house it occupies. The secondary ruler, while less powerful, still plays an important role in shaping events and outcomes. When planets are in their own signs, the signs they rule, or their signs of exaltation, where they are most favourably placed, their power is significantly amplified. This effect also occurs, though to a lesser degree, when planets are in their natural houses or houses of exaltation. However, when planets are in their detriment, signs opposite to those they rule, or their fall, signs opposite to their exaltation, they lose strength. In such cases, the unfavourable or challenging aspects of the horoscope may become more pronounced. Explanation of planetary rulerships. The table provided outlines how each planet is associated with specific signs and houses based on rulership, exaltation, detriment, and fall. The Sun rules Leo and is exalted in Aries. It is weakened in Aquarius, its detriment, and Libra, its fall. Its house of power is the 5th house. The Moon rules Cancer and is exalted in Taurus. It is weakened in Capricorn, its detriment, and Scorpio, its fall. Its house of power is the 4th house. Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo, while being exalted in Virgo. It is weakened in Sagittarius and Pisces, its detriments, with Pisces also being its fall. Its house of power is the 6th house. Venus rules Taurus and Libra and is exalted in Pisces. It is weakened in Scorpio and Aries, its detriments, with Virgo being its fall. Its house of power is the 7th house. Mars rules Aries and Scorpio while being exalted in Capricorn. It is weakened in Libra and Taurus, its detriments, with Cancer being its fall. Its house of power is the 1st house. Jupiter rules Sagittarius and Pisces while being exalted in Cancer. It is weakened in Gemini and Virgo, its detriments, with Capricorn being its fall. Its house of power is the 9th house. Saturn rules Capricorn and Aquarius while being exalted in Libra. It is weakened in Cancer and Leo, its detriments, with Aries being its fall. Its house of power is the 10th house. Planetary influences of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. While Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are not included in the main table of planetary rulerships due to their generational influence, they still hold significant astrological importance. These planets operate on a broader scale, influencing entire generations rather than individual lives in the same way as personal planets. However, they do have specific associations and co-rulerships that are worth noting. Uranus is associated with innovation, rebellion, and sudden change. It shares co-rulership with Saturn over Aquarius. While Saturn governs structure and discipline, Uranus brings revolutionary energy to Aquarius, creating a balance between tradition and progress. This dual rulership reflects the dynamic nature of Aquarius as both forward-thinking and grounded. Neptune is linked to dreams, illusions, spirituality, and creativity. It shares co-rulership with Jupiter over Pisces. While Jupiter governs expansion and wisdom in Pisces, Neptune adds a layer of mysticism and emotional depth. This partnership highlights Pisces' dual nature as both philosophical and deeply intuitive. Pluto represents transformation, power, and rebirth. It shares co-rulership with Mars over Scorpio. Mars governs action and drive in Scorpio, while Pluto adds intensity and the capacity for profound change. Together, they emphasize Scorpio's traits of determination and the ability to undergo deep personal evolution. In summary, while these outer planets are not traditionally assigned to specific signs or houses in the same way as personal planets, their co-rulerships enrich the understanding of Aquarius, Uranus, Pisces and Neptune, and Scorpio, Pluto. Their influences are especially impactful when considering generational themes or large-scale societal shifts. The general influence of the signs of the zodiac. The signs of the zodiac exercise a vibration over certain generalized interests of life. Zodiac signs and their domains. Aries rules matters concerning men, architecture, iron and steel, wool, timber, exploration, rioting, civil disturbances, civil war and international war, machinery, sheep. Taurus rules money and affects the monetary systems of the world, cattle, tobacco, copper, leather. Gemini rules railways and roads, all means of communication, postal, telegraphic and kindred matters, the local councils of individual countries as well as the grand councils of nations. Rating and local taxation come under its domination, literature, the civil services. Cancer governs property, the homes of the peoples of the world, old people and their welfare, housing schemes, inland waterways, all matters to do with domestic water, irrigation, etc., agriculture, silver. Leo has rule over the stock exchanges of the world, stocks and shares and their price fluctuations, children, education, art, gambling, betting and horse racing, gold, fashions. Virgo is associated with doctors and physicians, all health conditions, food, the police forces, conditions of work, servants and employees, the making of clothes. Libra has sway over public affairs and society, all matters to do with marriage and partnership, precious stones, especially diamonds, beauty culture, peace and peace treaties. Scorpio has domination over surgeons, dentists, brewers, barbers, beer, wine, spirits and soft drinks, ice and ice cream, chemicals, drugs, vivisection and anti-vivisection, all naval matters, conditions to do with death, legacies, death duties, oil, rubber, hotels, also regulations to do with vice. Sagittarius is associated with priests, lawyers, shipping magnates, accountants, and has to do with such things as pensions, ecclesiastical interests and regulations, religious observances, publishing, copyright, the mercantile marine and shipping as distinct from naval shipping and requisites. Tin. Capricorn governs trading conditions, politicians, especially those holding governmental positions, coal, lead and all building requisites, mining generally, the trade unions and the Trade Union Congress. Aquarius rules radio, science generally, Parliament as a whole, or any Congress or group representative of a country as a whole. Aviation, electricity, electronics, nuclear and kindred interests, the atomic and hydrogen bombs and all forms of rocketry and space travel, uranium and heavy water. Pisces governs prisons, hospitals, nurses, television, film interests and production, photography, all matters to do with fish and fishing, the boot and shoe industry, bankruptcy, secret treaties and all forms of enmity. The method of interpretation. In the foregoing pages, all the information has been given regarding the actual erection of the world horoscope for any solar period of 36 years, and for any year during the 36-year period both so far as the world as a whole is concerned, and for specific countries of the world. In addition, sufficient basic material for interpreting the actual trend of events has been supplied, and any person of normal intelligence will be able to blend these basic factors, and with his own knowledge of the trend of affairs over the world, will be able to draw common-sense conclusions, and to actually make authentic predictions regarding oncoming events and general world or national conditions. Naturally, practice increases the ability to make authentic forecasts. It is the same with astrology as with other professions and vocations. The more assiduous the practice, the greater the ultimate proficiency. Now for some practical initial guidance to assist interpretation. In the first instance, one must always remember that some nations in the world are more powerful and exercise greater influence than others. Thus, Great Britain, the United States of America, Russia, or the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics to give that country its correct title, Red China, Japan, France, Germany, India, Africa, etc. But more prominently, South Africa, Italy and Spain can broadly be taken in that order. So far as the Commonwealth is concerned, as a collective unit, it exercises a power equal to Great Britain itself, although of course each separate state possesses an autonomous power in its own individual right relative, naturally to its size and its period of attachment as a member of the Commonwealth. This might well be illustrated by regarding the Commonwealth as a family unit consisting of elder and younger members, exercising greater or lesser influence. It must always be remembered that the sign which rises in the world horoscope for any given year or period will operate through, or have its influence upon, or play its part by reason of, its emphasis upon the countries, states, or peoples which come under the rulership of that sign. Nevertheless, the overall supreme power lies with the rising sign that exercises power over the 36 years in its entirety. Signs that operate over individual years in the period must of necessity be subservient to the main influence, but will indicate the variations stemming therefrom. The zodiacal signs are organized into 3 distinct qualities: cardinal, fixed, and mutable. Let me walk you through each group. The cardinal signs are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. These signs initiate each season and represent new beginnings. The fixed signs, which maintain and stabilize energy, are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. The mutable signs, which adapt and transform as seasons change, are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. When a cardinal sign rises in the world horoscope for a 36-year period, it denotes that this period will, in the main, be one of progress and expansion in commercial activity, communication and transport, ideologies, political leadership. In the latter instance, the ungoverned ambition on the part of certain leaders or groups of leaders can lead to conflict when the year indications point in this direction. When a fixed sign rises, there will be a greater concentration of power upon those countries which come under its domination, and more particularly those countries which exercise the greater degree of power in the world at the time when their ruling sign becomes the rising sign in the period horoscope. As, for example, the present 36-year cycle which commenced in 1945 has the sign Aquarius rising and exercising a dominating influence over the world for the 36 years from 1945 to 1981. It is a fixed sign, and one of the leading world powers of the present day, whose ruling sign it is Russia, and who can deny but that the trend of affairs in the world has in many ways been dominated by the decisions and actions of the leaders in Russia, and in turn other world powers, as well as smaller nations, have been compelled to take into account any possible reaction by Russia to the decisions and lines of action that they themselves take. Fixed signs also give the indication of major changes, disasters, both territorial and international. They bring arbitrary conditions into force, some of which can be exceedingly beneficial, but others decidedly adverse. The wind of change will blow, but there will also be an expressing of obstinacy, and on occasions a carrying of the spirit of independence to an extreme. This will apply to individual nations, to leaders, and to industrial concerns alike. The application of varying kinds of force in order to reach objectives will be one of the keynotes, and the reaction of human nature will have to be allowed for. This will apply very markedly during those years in any cycle when a fixed sign also rises and synchronizes, as it were, with the fixed sign ruling the period as a whole. When a mutable sign rises in the period horoscope, the trend of events will not be quite so prominent, drastic, or upsetting as when a fixed sign rises, nor so progressive as when a cardinal sign rises, but in many ways there will be a period of quieter development of some of the major projects commenced upon during the previous period or periods. Political or racial tensions will not be quite so marked, and from an overall standpoint there will not be the same probability of the fierceness or antagonism of war. But this again does not imply that some form of war will not be likely, for, in the history of the world, there has seldom been any period of more than 20 years when some form of major war has not occurred, and in many instances minor wars have occurred or followed one another in much less periods of time. In assessing these probabilities or possibilities, one's personal experience and knowledge of world trends must be allowed for, as these will considerably aid the judgment and predicting of actual events. Now let's explore how these same zodiacal signs are also categorized by their elemental nature. There are 4 elements: fire, air, earth, and water. The fire signs, bringing warmth and energy, are Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. The air signs, representing intellect and communication, are Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. The earth signs, grounding us in practicality and material matters, are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. Finally, the water signs, flowing with emotion and intuition, are Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. Each sign belongs to both a quality and an element, giving it its unique characteristics and influence in astrological interpretations. When a fire sign rises, it will be a period of construction and expansion, of exploration, of mechanical development. On occasions, human hostility can occur, but would be more likely when the sign Aries was rising, although, peculiarly enough, the fire signs do not seem to throw the same emphasis on war as do the air signs, and this differentiation should be taken very markedly into account when making a diagnosis. When an earth sign rises, there will be a greater development and possible expansion of commercial and trading activities. Financial trends as affecting the world generally will be prominent for either good or bad. Interests to do with agriculture, cattle, and harvests will be of paramount importance, and when Capricorn is prominent, the political handling of the world's major activities from the peaceful standpoint will be of great importance. When an air sign rises, the indications of scientific progress, of educational, literary, and cultural development will be very marked, but there will also be a stressing of human feelings and reactions, particularly when Gemini or Aquarius function, and the danger of international war and of a severe disturbing of human relationships will be increased, most particularly in the case of Gemini. When a watery sign rises, there is shown to be a danger of recessions. World affairs decline, certain erstwhile strong nations lose power. There is a liability to great losses through flood, tempest, and similar disturbances, crops fail, and a great deal of personal and domestic suffering occurs. Some of these periods under watery sign influences coincide with the so-called dark ages, when knowledge is dissipated and lost, when man's previous arrogance, independence, unwise change, or undue seeking of pleasures and ease bring their inevitable reaction. Some of these conditions are often operative when the sign Pisces rises. Incidentally, in this respect, one can take a tentative and perhaps thoughtful look ahead to the next 36-year cycle, which follows the present cycle and commences at the vernal equinox in 1981. The sign Pisces then rises and exercises power for the ensuing 36 years until the year 2017. A great deal has been said, and is being said at the present moment, regarding the actual and the future potential increase in the world's population. Its present impetus seems to be becoming faster and faster. But in nature's cycles, there is invariably an exercising of balance, reaction occurs, and in vulgar parlance, a lean period follows a fat one. This can very well occur under the Pisces vibration. This indication is in itself a form of prognostication and a tentative future prediction, but it will give the reader an idea as to the way in which predictive capacity can be developed from even a broad knowledge of what signs and planets stand for by an association of ideas and, as stated, by a careful and thoughtful reflection upon world trends in almost any direction. The 1945 to 1981 cycle. Let us now take a more definite survey of an actual cyclic map so that methods of interpretation and prognostication can be extended. On page 33 is given the completed chart for the present cyclic period, covering the years from the vernal equinox of 1945 to the vernal equinox of 1981. We find that the sign Aquarius rises in this chart, and the rising sign in any period chart will give its name to the prevailing 36-year solar cycle. Thus, the present cycle is termed the Aquarian cycle. This, however, should not be confused with what is generally termed the Aquarian age, about which a lot has been written during the past few decades, much of it quite misleading. When, in astrological, historical, or even biblical matters, an age is referred to, it means a 12th part of the great age known as the precession of the equinoxes, which comprises a period of 25,920 years when the equinox precesses completely through the 12 signs of the zodiac. A 12th part of 25,920 years is 2,160 years, and this is termed an age, and is named after the zodiacal sign, through which the equinox happens to be precessing at any particular moment of the world's history. The present period, which commenced in the year 321 AD, comes under the vibration of the sign Pisces, hence it is termed the Pisces age, and it remains operative until the year 2481 AD, which is 2,160 years from 321 AD, from vernal equinox to vernal equinox. At the vernal equinox of 2481 AD, the Aquarian age will commence and go on the ensuing 2,160 years, ending at the vernal equinox of 4641 AD. Thus, an age lasts 2,160 years, but a cycle only lasts 36 years, and once one understands these two terms, confusion is obviated. So, at the present time, we are in the Pisces age of 2,160 years and the Aquarian cycle of 36 years. Let us now return, therefore, to a study of the chart set for the Aquarian cycle. The first thing to take into account is to assess the influence of the rising sign, in this case Aquarius, on certain of the countries of the world, and we can do this from the list of countries and sign rulerships as given on page 31. Bearing in mind naturally the relative strength and power of individual countries as viewed from the world standpoint. At once, the name of Russia stands out as being one of the most powerful countries coming under the Aquarian vibration. This sign also rules Arabia and the Arabian interests, including Egypt, which at this time is the country acting as the fulcrum of the United Arab Republic, in much the same way as Great Britain is the fulcrum of the Commonwealth of Nations. Other countries are Poland and Sweden, but from the standpoint of world powers and of political influence, Russia and the United Arab Republic must take precedence over the others. Therefore, it becomes simple to make the prognostication or prediction, as has already been made before the cycle commenced, that during the 36 years Aquarian cycle, from 1945 to 1981, many of the important world events during the cycle would revolve around Russia and the United Arab Republic, and that the destinies of these countries would be marked, that outstanding developments would occur, and that according to the political trends and the decisions of the leaders of these countries, so there would be reactions upon other countries of the world, and, as it were, upon the history of the world generally. We are now just over the halfway point in the present cycle, and it is common knowledge that many of the main world events that have occurred since 1945 have centred around the decisions made and the lines of action followed both by Russia and by the United Arab Republic. The Cold War between Russia and the Western powers, that at times has almost reached the point of hot war, the death of Stalin and Stalinism, the rise of Khrushchev, the Berlin crisis, the rape of Hungary, Cuba, the scientific achievements in connection with space travel. With the United Arab Republic, developed after the fall of King Farouk, and the subsequent rise of President Nasser, the Suez Crisis, the Aswan Dam, the intrigues and attempts to seize power in certain of the Arabian countries, and so on. All these things have stemmed from the originating vibration of Aquarius as the rising sign for the present cycle, and have been shown by the progressions over the individual years of the cycle. The second factor to take into account is the luminary, or planet, which takes precedence as the ruler for the period. And in our cyclic calculation, we have found that the moon takes precedence for the present cycle and will exercise major power over the period as a whole. Reference back to page 25, which gives a general indication of planetary influence, shows that the moon has rule over the masses of the people, the ordinary man in the street, domestic and family matters. Hence, it is again comparatively simple for the prediction to be made that during this cycle, in many parts of the world, it will be the desires and wishes of individual masses of people that will make themselves felt and sway the decisions taken by the leaders of those individual masses. The welfare of the ordinary man in the street and many of his main interests will be and has been affected. The industrial and political development in Great Britain has led to the ordinary working man, collectively, enjoying greater freedom and prosperity than at any previous time in history. The pursuit of independence and freedom has brought about a breaking up of the old system of empires and an emergence of new and independent nations. Some, whilst retaining their own individuality, linking with others, as in the British Commonwealth, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the United Arab Republic, and others aligning themselves with the United States of America, with Red China, or in such groups as the Common Market, the European Free Trade Association, NATO, SEATO. These developments can all be associated with the predominating influence of the moon over the cycle. The moon itself governs the principle of growth, and hence would signify the growth of population, the growth of individual nations and of groups of nations, the extension of the world's harvests, of agricultural and associated matters in order to feed the increasing population of the world, and the growth of general knowledge. These are all factors that can be envisaged from even a slight knowledge of the moon's influence over humanity, plus an association of ideas in connection with possible developments, as it is from this association of ideas that definite predictions can be made. It does not require one to be a master in any particular direction for some of these principles to be followed. Anyone of ordinary intelligence and imagination can for themselves review and analyse these planetary positions and assess possible developments, and as already stated, practice in these matters accentuates the capacity to make predictions that are both creditable and helpful. To proceed further in the analysis of the present chart, or for that matter any other chart, for the principles involved are the same. The luminary or planet that is the ruler for the period will appear in the chart more than once and in differing houses, sometimes as a major ruler, sometimes as a secondary ruler. This is where the house influence will play a prominent part, and reference can be made back to page 47, to which describe the broad influence of the houses. Taking again the present chart, the moon is the ruler for the period, and when we look at the chart we see that it is both major and secondary ruler in the first house. It is the major ruler in the sixth house, in conjunction with Venus, and in the sign Cancer, and it is the major ruler in the eighth house, in conjunction with Saturn, and in the sign Virgo. Its influence through the first house, where it is both major and secondary ruler, shows that many important changes will occur during the cycle of 36 years, changes in people's and people's outlook, in world opinion, and in the world itself, from many points of view. We are all now only too familiar with the expression, the wind of change, and we know the changes that have already occurred in the world, and can intelligently anticipate quite a number of the changes likely to come in the not-so-distant future. This combined lunar influence would also have influenced the first year of the cycle, from the vernal equinox of 1945 to the vernal equinox of 1946. And in that year, the factor of change was very marked, as it showed the end of the war in Europe and the Middle East, and the beginning of the end so far as the Far East was concerned. In Great Britain, it brought a drastic political change with a Labour government coming into power. Let us now look at the indications as shown by the moon being a major ruler in the 6th house. This house shows to rule international and national labour and trade union affairs, world and national health, etc., etc. And we can very well see the progress and development in these affairs that has taken place since the beginning of the present cycle. The moon, in conjunction with Venus, would also assist the financial side of industry and of the workers in industry, as Venus is a natural ruler over financial matters. The conjunction taking place in the sign Cancer would stress the importance of domestic matters, housing, food, agriculture and health, and once again it is common knowledge as to the developments that have occurred in these directions. Once again the reader can see the process of combining planetary and sign influence, and the reaction upon the world and people generally, and being able to make personal predictions. Continuing with this analysis, we come to the 8th house, where the moon is secondary ruler, in conjunction with Saturn in the sign Virgo. Reference once again to the influence will show that the 8th house rules all matters connected with death, and hence the position of the moon would signify that the deaths of important people and leaders would react upon the trend of affairs in the world, some in a favourable manner, and others from a tragic and even disastrous standpoint. To list but a few, the death of King George VI, of Stalin, the assassination of President Kennedy. From a world standpoint, the death of empires; from an individual standpoint, the tremendous increase in death duties, this being the Saturn accompaniment. It would also be interesting to check the death rate from various causes and the incidence of industrial disease, the latter coming under the Virgo influence, and death from terrestrial causes such as earthquakes, floods, etc. Enough, however, has now been said to show the method of interpretation of a cyclic chart. The sign influence on the cups of houses and the planetary influence, major and secondary in sign and house, can be assessed from the broad indications already given, and a most fascinating study can be proceeded with.